Iden Versio, a character that's been somewhat divisive among Star Wars fans, a character that often gets ignored as people skip the campaign. Not that I have a problem with her criticism or people skipping the campaign to have a blast in multiplayer. Battlefront never needed a campaign since Battlefront 2004. Piss off, cuck, gaming, critics. Star Wars stories are what every other Star Wars game and the shows, books, and movies are for. But speaking of multiplayer, this character goes hard as a multiplayer character. Her arrogance is hilarious to listen to in the midst of wrecking the underage kids that make up majority of this game's brain-dead player base. Despite switching to the rebels in the Rush campaign, Iden Versio is portrayed as a villain, which allows all of her lines to really lean into her strength, fierceness, and imperial arrogance. Here's a compilation of her multiplayer lines that I find hilariously give off these themes.
Bad idea taking me on. Fighting me is the worst plan you've ever had. Surrender is for the weak. Like you. There's a lot of you. So what? They're hopeless. I've had busier battles. You're throwing your lives away. Why are you wasting your time? No sense in fighting us anymore. They don't stand a chance. We're unstoppable. They're weak. That's it?
These lines are funny as hell, as bad as it sounds. A supreme intelligence, like myself, really relates to these lines as I consistently get to the top of the Heroes vs. Villains scoreboard as this nichely picked character, beating all the Vaders, Emperors, Bossk, Anakin, and Luke's, etc. Especially this line here.
They have hope. We have me.
That's like, totally me.
No, this whole thing, all of this, it's all about me.
Janina Gavankar does a great job voice acting, as she also has a few funny lines that she gives a bit of fun to while maintaining her Imperial persona. Like a funny Yoda line that goes hilariously hard.
Someone's coming! And they have a cape. Contact made with a Jedi? Scout spotted a small green thing. Shoot it!
Let me give some extra context within a few moments in the campaign. Iden Versio is an extremely loyal Special Forces soldier with daddy issues, as her father is a high-ranking Imperial officer who only treats her like a soldier, and not a daughter until the very end of the campaign where it's pretty much almost too late. I think this lack of parental gratification may have caused her arrogant behavior, because if no one else will pat you on the back when you do something great, you'll have to do it yourself. With the context of the campaign and the Imperial multiplayer lines, it slightly raises the question of, is your arrogance right? Is your arrogance okay or justified when you are what you claim to be? When you are just about at the top of your category you put yourself on a high pedestal for, like Iden being an elite soldier who can escape out of a rebel fleet by herself essentially. Just look at her in this scene.
Tell me, Iden, what is the source of their belief?
Hope. Look at that hot, smug look of arrogance she gives with that line. I am way too familiar with that face. I see it in reflective surfaces pretty frequently. I know that Iden Versio behaving like this may resemble some horrible Mary Sue characters like Captain Marvel and a bunch of others, but I find it excusably slightly works here, as Iden in a part of the story and as a multiplayer character is a villain, an Imperial one at that. Arrogance is common among Imperials, as we've seen in all forms of Star Wars media, which is why Vader pulls up to show him who's boss with multiple Force jokes that can even happen through the vacuum of space. Real Chad. Although the story half-assingly rushes through these story beats, Iden's arrogance gets humbled and flipped on its head as she switches sides through the Empire, doing a dumb vile act of attacking their own Imperial loyal planet. She even becomes a mom after everything is said and done. I'm not defending the over-rushed plot and its various dumb moments, especially as it ties into this butchered mess of a trilogy, but the themes are there despite the story being fairly messy. I don't know, maybe I'm reading into this too much and making up great themes for them accidentally, but the point is, she stops being arrogant once she switches sides and realizes all of her arrogance was placed in the wrong cause. This is one of the few ways someone could truly debunk and stop arrogance. Not by running away or just calling them arrogant or narcissistic, but by actually proving them wrong in a way that's basically objective. This won't work on some people though, admittedly. A question I do ask though is, what happens when the person is right? Is it even a problem anymore? Shouldn't the other person at that point just kneel or follow? I will admit that a bunch of the Imperial Iden lines sound like something a man would say more than a woman though.
You think you're ready to fight me?
I'm not saying ladies can't be arrogant or narcissistic, as that is definitely not the case, but their form of it is just more subtle and never really is directly spoken or boasted about on average in comparison to male characters like Anakin, Lex Luthor, Megamind, Dutch Van der Linde, etc. I don't know, a more realistic down-to-earth example of female arrogance doesn't have boasting as much. It's more like not admitting you're wrong and disagreeing for the sake of disagreeing, and then running away or gaslighting when confronted with something that debunks your dumb viewpoint. But I vibe with this more direct version of it on hot-ass Iden, but maybe that's more of a fantasy, as that form of female arrogance isn't really a thing, or is at least extremely uncommon. Few fictional women that come to mind as Azula and evil versions of Wonder Woman like Injustice and Flashpoint. Azula, as an example, sorta does it better than Iden, to be honest, as she maintains her femininity more. She's also basically a soldier too. I guess it's a theme among fictional female arrogance, apart from this masterpiece. But anyway, this experience may be unique to a high-tier Battlefront veteran like myself, especially as Iden has the lowest pick rate, only being rivaled by BB9. But let's get into the gameplay and how she plays, and how it complements her character. You could skip to this time code if you want to skip this gameplay segment, but I swear it's partially relevant to her arrogance. Iden Versio only has 650 health and can only regenerate 150 of it, which therefore ties her with Han as being one of the most squishy heroes in comparison to most other characters with more health or better regeneration, with the exception of Boba Fett. Keep this in mind when I later drill into the dookie takes of this game's brain-dead community. Iden Versio's main weapon is a TL-50 heavy repeater. Its primary fire is rapid spray and pray, but also has room for slower precision, with a secondary fire that operates similarly to a grenade that she can fire over and over again until her gun overheats. It's unblockable to sabers, and it does varying amounts of damage depending on how close it lands to the enemy. 150 damage is the most you'll do if you hit within 2 or less meters beside them. It's a little dumb how it doesn't reward direct hits like it did in the first EA Battlefront, or even the gun's first appearance in Jedi Knight Jedi Academy. There's also a card that allows you to fire at 25% faster, which you should probably be running. Her abilities are in an odd spot, as only one of them are any good for the most part, while one move varies a lot on its value. Let's start with the good one, her stun droid, which goes out and does 40 damage and a 1-second stun that allows you to open fire on them and take most of their health if you shoot them in the head. It could be dodged, but most people don't really pull it off. It could be blocked, but it would at least stagger them. This move can't be activated if no one is in range, so I found out that it's best to run around always spamming left bumper so that it automatically hits someone when they appear in range. Stunned enemies are highlighted, so this could also work as enemy spatial awareness. Then we have her droid shield that blocks all blaster bolts and explosives, which is a pretty great tool. Really high tier ability that basically makes it so that she's pretty much guaranteed to win a 1v1 or even a 1v2 gunfight against every gun user. I'm so skilled with my reaction time that I could occasionally activate the shield when Han's bomb is thrown in midair, therefore blocking all the damage before it detonates. I might be stretching with this, but I find that this move plays off of her arrogance as she remains untouchable to everyone else. It's a feeling I get myself as I use it against blasters and explosives to avoid damage and death before owning a gunfight. The one huge problem is that the move is great up until she fights a lightsaber, as her shield sadly doesn't work on any move a saber user has at their disposal. And to be honest, the thing that tends to kill a hero or villain gun user the most is usually a saber user like Anakin's pull into heavy damaging slashes. In heroes vs villains, most people take saber users, which usually makes up 3 or more out of a 4-player team, which means the move is essentially useless in Heroes vs Villains. It's not really worth putting the shield up in Heroes vs Villains instances because of this, as she also can't fire while the shield is up. There's some funny text my friend decided to do, like getting behind me as Darth Vader while my shield is up so that he wouldn't have to use block stamina as he moves in faster, basically getting in on the gun user for free. It was a really big brain play he decided to do, but the average dumb 90% Battlefront player wouldn't be smart enough to think of something half that useful. Her verbally calling upon her droid to use abilities feels really cool. It gives me Iron Man vibes.
Forward shield! Guard me! Droid, cover me! Zap him! Droid, target for you! Get him, droid. Zap that target!
And then we have her pulse cannon, a sniper that charges up for more damage, up to 233 damage to the head and a mere 89 to the body. It has a very slight amount of splash damage for missed shots, but it's nothing significant. There's a limit to how long you can hold it charged before it automatically fires for you. It's displayed through a bar. Oddly enough, you don't have to charge it up for anything more than a second to get full damage, which is honestly misleading. With the exception of a great performance in big modes like Supremacy and Galactic Assault, the sniper is quite useless in Heroes vs Villains as its damage isn't too far off from Iden's secondary fire. You basically have to be getting headshots to surpass the much easier to use secondary fire. I barely use the sniper at all for most of these reasons. Maybe some PC player who always gets headshots could get value, but unless you're no-touching grass perfect with that sniper, it's pointless in anything that is in a large setting like nearly every Heroes vs Villains map. I'm not touching on her star cards. They're too no crap, and some are just complete jokes similar to most star cards on most characters. These 3 which you could pause for are the only ones you should be using. Overall, her gameplay involves controlling her space via droid stun and secondary fire. She occasionally needs assistance from other villains, but not as much as Lando or Finn. Her gameplay feels great to master. Learning the fall arc of the secondary fire grenade mode to land crazy shots from long medium distances while its unblockable damage puts an end to the annoying dash and saber block spam. It becomes a technical mind game as you switch between fire modes. Her primary fire kills heroes really quickly, and quicker than her secondary fire, that's unblockable. So the technique is to use the secondary fire to break blocks, which conditions the enemy saber user to stop blocking and go on the offensive, which is when you decide to go back to the faster killing primary fire. The saber user may go back to blocking, which is when you decide to go back to the unblockable secondary fire, and the cycle loops as you capitalize with primary fire as you land the droid stun. It's not saying much with how mechanically brain dead this Battlefront is in comparison to other Battlefronts or other hero-esque shooters like Plants vs Zombies, a bit of Overwatch, and Paladins, but she's probably as sophisticated as an EA Battlefront 2 character can get. Definitely the most skill requiring villain, with the only rivals in skill requirement being hero gun users, but that's honestly due to them being less powerful overall. Hana's the only one that can consistently somewhat fight a saber on his own. She takes skill and is probably up there on the tier list, probably a high A tier villain who belongs in one of the 4 of an HVV comp. I get the scoreboard as her nearly every time. Oh right, and to the brain dead player base that calls her overpowered, piss off. You're just mad that she has a skill gap and can actually win a fight against a saber user as she stops him from blocking every blaster shot, as opposed to other gun users where it's unwinnable for characters like Lando, Finn, or Leia that has ran out of grenades. All of the other villain gun users have much less of a skill gap. Everything Bossk does is easy except for his primary weapon. All of his abilities are unblockable. You can't even activate or destroy the deployed bombs without getting hit most of the time. Phasma just camps, and Fett runs away in a way that's not catchable or barely catchable. Emperor is subtle, leeching aimbot. Saber users are brain dead in general, but Vader specifically just doesn't lose the 1v1. He occasionally ignores knockdowns for no reason and holds his own against entire teams at times, and he isn't even that slow. Players who say this are dumb down with the syndrome, noobs that take up most of this game's player base, sadly. Dumbins who complain about Han because he can actually win against the Saber on his own. Players who complain about BB-8 being overpowered, even though he relies on one move that people could stun him out of and is guaranteed to lose to Emperor and Fed. Players that sat by as Lando got nerfed into the ground. Iden's so-called secondary spam is excusable as 2 of her abilities are next to useless in hero combat. It's already bad enough the prequel-hating Star Wars critic community are dumb, but now I have to deal with another dumb Star Wars community when it comes to a video game? Whatever. Back on topic. Overall, it feels great to play as her with moves like the shield that boost confidence and ego as I get to taunt people who can't break the shield. Getting the scoreboard consistently as a skill requiring character really goes hard as you hear her arrogant lines along the way. Oh, did I mention she's hot? Not gonna lie or cap when I say she do be being bussin' for real, dead ass on God. Physical perfection if I do say so myself. There's a good reason I made her my channel cover girl. Some people say beauty is within the eye of the beholder, but that's something that people say as a coping mechanism for an ugly partner or ugly reflection. I know it sounds mean, but it's true. It makes sense as her actor Janina Gavankar was a literal model. The game makes her look uglier at certain times though, but it's not as deliberately bad as PS4 Mary Jane. I guess you can argue that it's something that may tie into Iden's arrogance, as beauty is a thing that is most likely to give a woman such behavior, only being rivaled by her being spoiled by her daddy. But speaking of beauty, I find her placement on the villains a little funny, as most of the villains are helmeted menacing figures. Sith Lords that are old and wrinkly, menacing aliens, cyborgs, and then there's Iden, looking like a literal supermodel as you switch skins and take that helmet off. But overall, with all these points put together, I adore Iden Versio. Mostly due to her multiplayer lines that stick to the Imperial perspective as a campaign and advertisers originally promised before switching her to the Rebels too quickly. I know she has a book that expands on the depths of her, but I'm not delving into it. I shouldn't have to read a book to understand a game. I don't even think there's much multiplayer gamers that read books as well, especially with this game's player base, which is made up of a large percentage of children. It might have been a debate if they were at least a comic instead, like the Injustice books, but anyway, multiplayer is where the meat of the game is, and the meat of good character lines and exchanges as well. This even spills into other characters as well, even Disney characters like young Han Solo or Kylo Ren. Their movie content may be iffy or bad, but they're pretty cool in the game. It's sort of one of the few beauties in this game despite its flaws. But even with those flaws, it's a shame they stopped supporting this game, as others have said. The support was short-lived, especially under the context of them taking close to a year to release a hero after launch. I would have loved to hear about Ahsoka or Ventress. It's not like the company has another multiplayer Star Wars game apart from that niche audience Squadrons flop. But anyway, that's enough rambling. I gotta go because I do be bustin' for real dead ass.
You think you're ready to me? Pick up the pace, pick it up! There it is. You feel that? Close, I can feel it. I'm coming for you. It's not over yet. We're just getting started. Come on! That's it?